and the group who started the advanced software division at EMC. And our strategy has been to come in here and make this a software-defined platform, right? And our team specifically focuses on how to make this storage software completely as this. We're talking of Legos, a Lego-based architecture, so that the software, where the storage, the protection, the geo application, everything is a Lego that's abstracted away from the southbound, the hardware, or the northbound, the access protocols. So that's what we do in this advanced software division. And my role here is a product manager, so in charge of working in the different aspects of the object, taking it to market, the implementation strategy, and go-to-market strategy for it.
All right, so Kamal, you're wearing the Elastic Cloud Storage shirt.
This is a new logo.
Yeah, last year at EMC World, ECS 1.0 was released. Bring us up to speed where ECS is today.
Sure. So we came to EMC World last year. We announced our 1.0, which was our first version of Elastic Cloud Storage. We had shipped Object Platform, which was shipping as part of Viper, even prior to that, but it was running against Intelligent or Platform 2 arrays. When we came to last year's EMC World in 2014, we said now we've got this complete commoditized Elastic Cloud Storage running on commodity hardware, and we shipped it in form factor of an ECS appliance. Now, fast forward this year, 1 year onward, we've come with Elastic Cloud Storage 2.0. Our strategy is to take the software, as I was talking about, this Lego-based architecture. We want to not only enable the EMC commodity appliance, but we want to enable all third-party commodity appliance. And going further, we want to enable wider dev test running on your laptops or running on any kind of commodity infrastructure where you can do scale testing, right, without having to deploy a huge infrastructure for an object store. That's where 2.0 is. In 2.0, we've done a lot of enhancements from the product itself. We've done a lot of geo enhancements for multi-site optimizations. So one of the things I would say is that we've been testing in the background since 1.0 with a lot of customers who've been deploying, not just the internal customers, but even some of the external customers who've been deploying at scale thousands of nodes and testing multi-petabyte environments. And over here at DockerCon, we were talking about this. We were talking to a lot of customers here who have come here talking about their own Docker experience. So one thing I was learning was that I think EMC has come out with this Dockerized container for Elastic Cloud Storage, right? And this is one of probably the containers that's running thousands of nodes of stateful Docker in production in enterprises. So I was glad to hear that a lot of people gave positive feedback and pat on our shoulders for having to run Docker in this fashion. The other enhancements we've done are a lot of monitoring diagnostics because we're running a cloud platform. We are enabling these enterprises and service providers to run their own cloud with the Elastic Cloud Storage. So when they're doing that, they need insight into the system, not only in terms of performance, but how the system is keeping up, how the capacity is utilized, the network metrics, all those kind of things. So we've gone ahead and done a lot of monitoring and diagnostics, so giving them the capability of running the whole private cloud in their environment. So those are some of the enhancements that we've done. And then we've also caught up with a lot of enterprise IT readiness, a lot of service provider readiness in the system to make many of these customers go to production with ECS 2.0.
All right, so Kamal, you gave a session this afternoon.
Yes.
How many people showed up? And give us a little
Sure.
Spotlight of what you talked about.
So we ran a session on Docker tutorial. It was a tutorial session on Docker persistence. So essentially there were two pillars on it. There were about 100 plus people. In fact, the guy who was running the session came in and said, we might be in violation of the fire code there because the room was packed and there was floor seating and standing and maybe some people on the podium, I don't know. So the session was really on how EMC is contributing to Docker in terms of persistence. So we came out with some announcements on how our EMC code team has done some cluster HQ work and how we've contributed back to the Docker community. And the second part of this session was on the Elastic Cloud Storage and how we've run this in a Dockerized version and how it's available for customers to download and use and do dev test. So we've made it available not just as a container, but we've put some Puppet scripts around it. So it's available on GitHub, on Docker Hub, so you can go download. It's emc.com, get ECS, or go to github.com, search ECS, and you should be able to find the software.
Yeah, so when you look at the applications that sit inside Docker, lots of the applications are, stateless and short-lived. But when you start talking about stateful applications, they probably live a little bit more. Can you bring us through what you see at the application side, and how does EMC make any differentiation on various type of apps?
Sure. I think the whole containerization is catching up, right? As we can see around us at the DockerCon, the second DockerCon, just the energy and the number of people shown up here. So container as a service, or the applications and microservices running, it's catching up. So as this is catching up and customers are trying to have these conversations on how do I move from a stateless, just taking my application running within a Docker container, to making this equivalent of, if you rewind back when VM started, right, and was getting into this mode of making VM the next big thing to run, there was these challenges that you had to overcome, right, get over the hump. I think Docker is at the same place, where statefulness is the first problem, one of the biggest challenges to solve. And even at our Birds of Feather session during launch, we were having some interesting conversations with some biogenetics company and some financial companies, kind of very different verticals, but the challenges they were having is the same thing, because they have a mix of greenfield and brownfield applications. They're trying to get into their data center, which is all containerized, and they're trying to get it stateful, solve the typical common challenges which are solved in a VM world. And when they come here, they're facing the problem. One of the big things is the persistence, right? Because they have to get the volume persistence for local, but now when you move, your container dies, your state dies. So you need to get that, brought up that container in another node, that container needs to have the same state. So how do you solve those problems? So with EMC, what we're contributing to this Docker community with the Scale.io and Cluster HQ, and with ECS, with this automated thing, it's giving persistence from two aspects. Persistence from a local volume, or going across the Scale.io, and also persistence from this cloud, deploying an object store and getting your containers being able to use this persistence of raw commodity infrastructure.
Yeah. So can you talk about, you mentioned a couple of vertical use cases. Where do you see this starting out? Are we mostly really in kind of, test beds at the point? And, maybe walk us through what we should expect to see from a maturity standpoint of persistent apps in containers.
I think, the gentleman I was having a conversation on, he was from financial vertical, and he was in fact running production with one of his applications, right? So he was running like a few thousand containers in production, not just dev test. So I think containerization is picking up not just for dev test, but also for production, right? And it depends, the verticals, we see definitely the financial verticals picking up, some of the verticals around the research labs, the genomics, those kind of life sciences verticals, definitely taking the leap ahead into the space and getting a lot of their applications, because they have more leeway to get into this containerized world with the microservices. So we see them much more moving forward ahead in comparison to some of the other verticals, but some of the other verticals are also catching up in terms of running. So for example, one of the customers we work with, they're running a completely media company, and they're trying to back up to the cloud. They're building a data center which is all container based. And at EMC World, they were at the on stage with CJ. This is Verizon. We're talking about how they're building this container only data center, right? So that all their applications, including storage, could be containerized and run in this new data center, right? This Gen Next data center for their applications. So it's not just greenfield, but also brownfield applications.
That's great. So you're seeing it in production, because we were getting some hallway chatter during one of the breaks where somebody was saying, we do a lot of stuff besides production, but we haven't really figured out the production thing. We're not really ready to cross that bridge, so we're doing a lot of other things. Right. But it sounds like you talk to a lot of people here at the show that are in production, that are using it.
Right. I would say a lot of people are getting there, and some people have already gone into production, right? That's how I would categorize. And it's not without challenges. I think there's a big hump to cross. So any of the customers we are working with today, it's not without challenges that they get to where they are, even with dev test or production. Like challenges along the networking, verticals of things. I think Docker today in the keynote, they were announcing some of the networking, how they are changing some of those things, how within the container you can get some of those similar concepts of segregation, all the traffic related to VLAN tagging, those kind of things within there. some of the aspects of how to standardize the container deployment, right? And again, there's like a lot of fabric technologies available, but which fabric technology to choose to run there? For example, we had to write our own fabric technology when we did ECS 1.0. Since I said even with ECS 1.0 we were running in containers, and if you think about it, Docker didn't go GA at that time when we were working on ECS 1.0.
Right.
So we had to pick up a pre-GA version of Docker, and we placed a bet on it, right? And we said Docker is going to become big, and we found some really great use cases for Docker to be the big bet for us. So when we picked up, there was no fabric, there was no mesos, there was no fleet in the state where we could go and use that for our deployment and lifecycle management for containers. So we had to build our own fabric, which was doing this lifecycle management. And since then it has evolved. So now we have our own fabric, which does a lot of this lifecycle management and those kind of things. Now being EMC, we could invest in a lot of these kind of investments in engineering to get this fabric. Now that's not true for many companies, because think of this doesn't scale, right? Even if you can, investing in these kind of every single problem to get your Docker to production, I think those are the challenges companies are facing in order to get to production.
Yeah, so it's, we're still in the early days here, Kamal. One of the things I'm curious about, you guys do scalable architecture, you're leveraging Docker. Can we do that over a geographic distance if we're containers? Because, kind of the persistence is one thing, but getting that, replication and, having applications span distances is usually a pretty hard challenge. And
right.
I didn't think we were there yet, but I'm curious if you could, clarify for us.
ECS is completely a geo-distributed, active-active, strongly consistent architecture, right? So if you think about it, the fact that we are running in containers is giving persistence from the underlying layer of the object storage, and the object storage itself is a geo-replicated, strongly consistent system. So if you think about the application running within the container, it's getting this geo-distributed nature by the fact that the underlying storage is getting this geo-distributed, strongly consistent, active-active infrastructure, right? So to quote again from the keynote, I think there was a time when it was put in the slide that it's the applications that need to evolve along with the infrastructure, right? You can't just rely on infrastructure to evolve and the application doesn't catch up, and then you're going to have this disparity that's going to be similar to how networking evolved, right? Networking infrastructure evolved, but then it's very disconnected from the applications. So in the same light, in this case, unless the applications evolve, you're not going to be able to get this whole whole next-gen architecture with it. That's where, like, for example, in Elastic Cloud Storage, when we built it, we relied on the fact that we'll build the persistence, make the application development easier. So let's say any application, this media application that they're building, they get the persistence, they get the geo-replication, they get both those nice functionality by just writing to our APIs. And the fact that they're running on containers is a very great abstraction for them. So they can move their containers across data centers, they can bring it up in a completely different data center. Because they have a global namespace from the underlying infrastructure, they get that benefit from how ECS is giving them that advantage.
So Kamal, one of the things that's just blown me away at this show is when you talk to the Docker people and people that have worked on some of these projects, from the kind of ideation to delivery is like ridiculously short periods of time. And you say, those plugins, we had Patrick on from the technical staff. He's been with the company 3 months and he did a bunch working on, these plugins. We had, guy from Lyft talk about, what Docker allows them to do is when they hire a new developer, they spend the morning doing an introduction and the afternoon they're deploying. I mean, they're just moving in there. How's a company like EMC look at this? Because, I worked at EMC, and, we did release cycles in 12 to 18 months kind of development, and things are moving so fast. So I'm curious how that shift impacts what you're doing inside EMC.
Sure. So I think that's a great segue into the DevOps side of things, right? So we started this team called the EMC Code, which the specific charter that, like, the goal of this team is to help the DevOps get better, right? So not just for the EMC products, but as you're seeing, we are contributing back to some of the technologies available out there in the community. So one of the advantages by doing that is that by the wider community,